What's up, everyone? How you guys doing? And today we will be talking about the 5.65 star polling opinions. Probably it's a series that I'll probably want to start making over time. But today we will be talking about the 5 stars for the patch and whether you should pull for them. So let's begin. All right, so the point of this video is not really to be a pool ranking video, to say that this is a 10 out of 10 character, to say that this is a 5 out of 10 character, but realistically is to give the players the expectations that they need of the better units, especially for those who are thinking of pulling for the new unit Escoffier, right? There are some that she's definitely a strong unit, but there'll be some considerations where you may not want to pull her. And so this is to allow or to inform the players of what to expect if you were to pull for them, or something to expect for the future. Ultimately, pull who you like, especially for main DPS, because technically, even if a character gives you the highest damage output, if you do not like how they play, it can be a little bit of a rough spot because you're not enjoying your time with the character. Because main DPSs are the characters that you will have on field most of the time. Therefore, you need to really take that into consideration. And so let's just begin with the 4 characters. All right, first and foremost, let's talk about Escoffier, who is Cryo Polam Fontaine, who his arc alignment is Usia. She plays into the roles of sub DPS support and healer, so she is a 3-in-1. The most important part of her kit, and the one that's advertised the most, is the first talent, or technically it's the second talent, but it's the first one that we'll talk about, which is the Cryo or Hydro Rare Shred. Now, this is up to 55% if your whole team is made up of Cryo and Hydro units, and this activates after you use the skill and the burst. Now, the rest shred does decrease by quite a bit, so you lack 1 or 2 characters of these elements on your team. If you lack 1, it drops all the way down to 15, and if you only have 1 character, which is Escoffier, then you will drop down to 5%. So it's quite a big difference, and therefore, as we'll talk about later, you really want your teammates to be of Hydro and Cryo. Now, the skill does do quite decent off-field Cryo damage and application, but it also has a whole function which kind of like is more for cooking. That we'll talk about. We won't talk about that much. But the burst is one that also does help, especially if you play with Farina, because not only does it give a big AoE damage at the start, but also a big team heal, which with the second talent, or technically the first one, the A1 passive, then your active character will have healing once per second for 9 seconds. So it is quite a lot sustain, especially if you have a teammate like Farina, where it helps build up the fanfare stacks. Now we're going to do the pros and cons of Escoffier. The first one is obviously that it does give insane buffs for freeze-based teams. The one downside of freeze teams in the past, besides obviously being power crap due to the lack of grouping and stuff, is that they don't really benefit from elemental masteries. Other reactions like Vaporize, Quicken, they can get a lot higher because elemental mastery does help benefit their damage. But then for freeze-based teams, EM does nothing. At the same time, team-wide healing is very nice, especially when Farina is involved in the team. So it does give a lot of damage to the team in whole, because you're getting the fanfare stacks for Farina's burst. And third and foremost, you also don't need your enemies to be frozen to receive the buffs. Some of the buffs, like from Blizzard Straya, does require them to be frozen, and therefore this one, the 55% elemental rare shred, doesn't need the enemies to be frozen to activate. This one's more of an off thing, but from what we can see, her best sets look to be Golden Troop or Blizzard Straya. I think Golden Troop does edge it out quite a bit, and this is an artifact set that can be crafted, so you can build up your other artifacts for other characters for the future, and then you can use the scraps to craft the Golden Troop. Also, room for future growth. We do know that we do have future units coming in, potentially Skirk as well. So we had to wait for the 5.7 drip marketing for confirmation, but definitely a lot of room for future growth. And it's also a team that does not require Bennett, who is a very hot commodity. So talking about the cons for Escoffier, she does have restrictive team building, as mentioned earlier. The elemental rare shred maxes out if you have all team members of Cryo and Hydro. and then you lack any one or two of them, it drops by quite a bit. And of course, you can still use her outside of that, but that means that your team building is quite restricted because you're incentivized to build all Hydro and Pyro in the team. At the same time, she is quite Furina / Yelan question mark. Depends on the team. As of now, Furina is the more dependent character, but depending on what future units look like, Yelan could also be a very good teammate. Especially because we don't have the buffs from Kazuha, Shilonen, or Bennett, means that Furina will be even hot demand because of that. At the same time, for many teams, especially for Neuvillette teams, the Lali tends to be the only viable scroll user because she is the only, at least you count Mualani, but because Mualani is also a main DPS, and you technically one runner on Obsidian Codex. So Sitlali is technically the only viable scroll holder for your team. So here are some pool considerations that you should consider. First and foremost, if you don't play in freeze-based teams, her value drops by quite a lot. Not to say that she's useless without freeze, but the difference is quite noticeable. And at that point of time, you may want to use someone like Shilonen, Kazuha, Bennett, so on and so forth. And definitely, depending on the roster that you have and who's dream marketed for 5.7, if the character's in your plans, then obviously that's pretty good. One thing I also never mentioned is that because we're not going to Sheshnaya anytime soon, but we will be seeing Sheshnaya in the future, and definitely her value may be higher then. But depending on what you have on your roster, especially you don't have a freeze unit, then your value of your unit will be very low. That being said, you play in freeze-based teams, she is very strong and definitely will make most, if not all, of your freeze-based teams. Now let's go on to Navia, who is also from Fontaine, Geo, Claymore, also Osea line. She mostly plays as a main DPS, but in some niche cases can be played as a quick swap DPS. It is not her recommended playstyle, but people do try it. So the main thing about Navia is that she makes use of crystallized shards, the thing that's quite useless for most cases. She uses that as ammunition for crystal shrapnel stacks. The other way to get the stacks is to use her burst, which gives her charges once every 2.4 seconds. Now, the main thing about Navia is with her skill, where she wants to use the stacks from the crystal shrapnel for additional damage. This is very big and front loaded, and you get 2 charges of it, which means that it helps you to rotate between your attacks and abilities. It also gives you Geo Infusion with your first talent, which means that you're able to generate crystallized shards from your basic attacks as well. And as I mentioned earlier, the burst gives crystal shrapnel stacks, but also does a little bit of AoE damage periodically as well. The other thing with Navia is that unlike other Geo characters before her, she tends to want characters of the Pack or the Pyro, Electro, Cryo, or Hydro elements as the teammates, because each teammate gives her 20% attack up to 40% in total. So some of the pros of Navia: she's very good in single target damage. If she was a Honkai style, she'll be a hunt character for sure. And the good thing is that her damage, even though front loaded, is split among 2 skill charges, which allows flexible rotations and using your abilities as well. She also benefits very highly from attack sources like double pyro resonance and also from Bennett as well. And because she makes use of the pack elements, this means that this helps not only expand her team options, but also as the elements or as the options get bigger in the future, it helps to widen her horizon as compared to like a mono Geo team. And while the crystallized shields aren't really the main part of the kit, it does provide a little bit of comfort in your teams as well. Now, some of the cons, obviously because she's mostly single target, there is very little AoE outside of electro charge team comps. That obviously it does still work with the electro charge, but it's obviously far from her most optimal team. And she can be Bennett and Furina dependent. Most of the time, she's more dependent on Bennett because obviously she's attack scaling, and Bennett does give her the buffs as well as being a pyro unit as well. At the same time, because the skill's also very front loaded, you do require high crit rate, because low crit rate means that you have, if you lose your crit, you won't be doing your max damage. And at the same time, because Navia usually wants a second Geo character, not only for the Geo resonance, but because Shilonen does give very good support. The main problem is that your second Geo does have issues depending on how you look at it. The Shilonen, which is obviously her best in slot partner, does not help her generate crystals off field, which means that Navia herself is solely reliant on the crystals to help generate her shrapnel stacks. Whereas Zhongli and Albedo, even though they are able to generate it off field, their buffs aren't as strong. So some of the pool considerations for Navia. So first and foremost, she is obviously the best Geo DPS, which isn't really much of a competition. Yes, Ito can work, but if you are a collector of like one character per element, then Navia is a high consideration for you. And as mentioned earlier, she got a lot better since her last rerun with Shilonen, because prior to Shilonen, she did not have many characters who provided Geo res threat. So this really helps to amplify her damage by quite a lot. Even if you do, and yeah, that's also including the Scroll of the Cinder City artifact set as well. That being said, she's also very reliant on characters like Bennett with Shangling, Furina, or Malvika for max damage. So that really is also a consideration that you have to take into account. And at sometimes, depending on the characters like with Furina or even with Thrilling Tales, they can have issues with maintaining rotation durations at all times. It is not really that big unless you go into like 1 minute plus rotations or 1 minute plus battles in Abyss, but it can be a little bit awkward when you start to see some desync in your rotation timings. Raiden Shogun, who is obviously a very old character, and I'm quite surprised that she got a rerun this time. But let's talk about her. She's an Electro Polearm from Inazuma, obviously as the Archon, and she basically does everything. Main DPS, sub DPS support, and she does that through the many ways her kit works. She does have a very long kit, so do stay with me. Basically, her skill is just provides your team with off-field Electro with pretty good uptime that it basically feels like a team-wide passive, and also increases the team burst damage with the passive. Now the burst, once you unleash it, does animal electro damage, and also your normal attacks and your plunge attacks, everything all become electro, and they are scaled off your burst. Now this has more damage if you use it with higher resolve stacks, which is basically gained when your teammates use their burst, and the higher the energy cost of their burst, therefore you will have higher resolve stacks. When she's in her burst mode, she does restore energy to her teammates as well, which is a good way of funneling characters who have high ER requirements. Right, and at the same time, her first talent gives more resolve stacks when the team receives energy particles, while the second talent gives more energy restoration and electro damage bonus with the ER. So that's why you're incentivized to build Raiden with ER, not only to fill up her her burst, but also because her damage does scale with energy recharge as well. So some of the pros of Raiden Shogun, right? As a character, she is very versatile. She's able to dip herself into a main DPS where she's able to drive for reactions, a sub DPS with her skill for teams like Hyper Bloom, and also as a support to help generate energy for her teammates. Electro over time has also had pretty good buffs, with both Dendro and Overload being very nice with the addition of Chevrus. And at the same time, in teams like Physical, right, she is also a very good trigger for Superconduct and Hyper Bloom as well. And her kit helps characters with high ER requirements because she does help to support them by funneling energy into them as well. Now, that being said, Raiden Shogun is a pretty old character. She's been around for 4 years at this point in time, since 2021. And while she has still held up, her personal damage at C0 is a little bit outdated. This does not mean that she is bad, but you probably need to put more investment into her, or to also supply her with like more premium teammates as well. At the same time, to her other roles like a sub DPS or as a support, she does have characters that help with that role as well. Kuki, Shinobu, Fischl, Beidou do work very well. And the problem also with her normal attacks is that she does not get normal attack buffs or effects that require normal attack or charge attack hits, the most famous of this being Beidou. Now here are some pool considerations for Raiden Shogun. As of this time, she really doesn't have much value as a main DPS at C0, especially if you own Chlorend or Veresa. If you do own the both of them, then it makes little sense to pull her for a main DPS because her damage cannot really compare for a character that was released 2 to 3 years after them, but before them, sorry. And yeah, that being said, she's also very dependent on their teammates now than before. This means that instead of using characters, and while characters like Bennett, Xiangling, and Xingqiu can still do it, it definitely doesn't feel as comfortable and it's more situational. That being said, I myself has used Raiden Shogun on the Abyss multiple times for showcases. You can watch these videos on my YouTube. But definitely for players who do not have high investments on Raiden, you may want to find that you need more investments in your other 3 teammates instead. Nonetheless, C2 is still a strong constellation because you ignore 40% of the defense. So definitely it's something that you can still consider. That being said, obviously, it does require more pulls, especially if starting from fresh or at C0, than pulling a new unit like Chlorend or Veresa. This is not to, as I mentioned, obviously, this is not to dissuade you from pulling for her, but this is to make you aware that she does require more work, especially if you want to play her as a main DPS. Last but not least is Kinich, who is making his first rerun Dendro Claymore Netland character, and he is mostly as a main DPS. The main part of his damage comes from his skill, where he latches onto his enemy, enters into his Night Soul Blessing, and he does his swing around the enemy, and he fires shots that can convert into the Scale Spiker Cannons. This is his biggest scaling attack, and it's one that you want to get off as much as possible. The burst isn't really the main part of his damage, but it does provide more Dendro attacks, and at the same time also extends his blessing state, which means that you want to use it while he is in his Night Soul Blessing. The first talent that he has does, whenever he hits his enemy by his skill, he restores his Night Soul points when you hit them if they have Burning or Burgeon. So these are the teams that you really want to play him in. And his second one increases the Spike Scalar Cannon's damage when a Night Soul Burst is triggered, which is the white flash of the Netland symbol that you see in combat sometimes. Some of the pros of Kinich is that he, just like Navia, has very good front-loaded damage from his skill, and he's able to close the distance very easily with that ability because it automatically latches on them. He's also very good at single target, so once again, very hunt character. You play Honkai Star Rail, and doesn't really need much team investments, right? He mostly wants Bennett, but then again, most characters won. And last but not least, if you really want a chance to enter into the Survey Corps from Attack on Titan, he is your greatest way to enter. So some of the cons of Kinich is that Kinich does require optimal gameplay to maximize his damage. That's because you want to get the most amount of Scale Spiker shot cannons as possible, and definitely isn't a switch off your brain kind of character as compared to the likes of Malvika and Neuvillette. So players who want to pull him do need to know what they're getting into. Right? Ben is also his best in slot because Kinich is a lot more mobile, whereas Bennett's buff is a lot more stationary. It can be a little bit hampering if you don't use it at the right position. At the same time, Ben is also a very high in demand unit amongst characters as well. Even among the Netland roster, you can see that characters like Chaska and also Malvika really want him. At the same time, many Dendro second slots find it hard to upkeep Deepwood. Besides Emily, there aren't many who do that because of the way burning reaction works. And at the same time, just like Navia, he needs high crit rate to maximize the Scale Spiker Cannons as well. So some of the pool considerations for Kinich, as mentioned earlier, is not the easiest character to play. It's not a very switch off your brains kind of character, and definitely you need to actually practice with him. This is really a character that you really want to really pull if you actually like and enjoy and know his play style. At the same time, right? Even though he can play in quicken teams, Burgeon and Burning is much better because obviously he gets more damage from his talents. And at the same time, depending on the team that you pull, or team that you want to play with, he does want different supports. Emily works a lot better in burning teams, whereas in burgeon teams, any of the hydro sub DPSs are generally preferred. So we've come to the end of the video, and I thank you all for watching. Once again, a reminder that this is not a pulling guide. This is more of information on the characters on the banner to let you know what you are getting yourselves into by pulling for these characters. So if you want Raiden Shogun, go for it. Don't let the people tell her that she is power crap, right? That being said, obviously let me know in the comments down below who you are pulling for. I am pulling for Ayaka because I'm going to make Ayaka great again in 2025. And so for the rest of y'all, if you like this video, thumbs up, share, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And do note that I stream live on Twitch. Link is down in the description below. And until the next video, stay healthy, stay safe, be good to yourselves and the people around you. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.